What's up, fellas? Moon here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we got a little bit of something, a little something controversial to talk about. Not really all that controversial. I guarantee you a lot of the opinions in this video are going to be pretty well informed and reasonable, but I will say that it's funny how just as I'm getting back into the game, how I'm really getting back into WoW PvP, I made a video about how I've been having a lot of fun with the game, and I guess categorically I would consider myself a WoW PvP content creator. I wanted to take a look at this video because my brother sent me it, actually. And so today we're going to be responding to Asmongold, talking about this is why WoW PvP is so bad. It looks like the first couple minutes are him responding to Zaryu, so I'll try not to interrupt too much. I do want to weigh in on the matter as a PvP Andy to, 1, push back where I feel necessary, 2, add context or even add points to Zach's arguments, and 3, because I think it's fun. Alright, I love talking about World of Warcraft. So, without further ado, let's get right into it.
Reason retail PvP is bad? Alright, let's look at this. I haven't looked at any WoW stuff for a while.
Okay. I don't... How do I talk about this? Raikou, if you guys don't know, is one of the most distinguished WoW pros in the AWC.
Yep.
He's had many tournament wins over many expansions. Highly respected mage player in the community. And Vanaruki, same thing.
Yep.
Let's get into this just a little bit. In general, Dragonflight PvP, and most likely the War Within, just suffers from the same problem. Everything is catered towards Mythic Plus so that everyone has to do insane AoE damage and everything has to AoE. But this is the exact opposite of what Arena is supposed to be. This is...
I think that's probably true. He's probably right.
Very well said. This is very well said.
This, by the way, is the reason why PvP in an MMO will always be bad. And you should never try to make PvP balanced in an MMO, because in doing so, like, PvP is always going to be a side game. It's always a side game. The majority of people, unless it's like one of these like niche PvP MMOs, if you have a big game, the majority of people are not going to be doing PvP.
I talk about this all the time on my stream.
Yeah, I mean, he's right. I think that's why, at least when you make PvP in a MMO type of game, you really should play up that whole fantasy aspect that draws so much of an audience within to the MMO. And so I've been thinking about this for the past couple months of like, okay, well, how do you actually design PvP for an MMO? You don't try to treat it like the next League of Legends or Counter-Strike or whatnot. What you do is you try to make it as fun as possible so that more players within the game as a whole will want to play PvP. Because, at least in the WoW PvP community that's already very small as it is, we are not recruiting new players outside of WoW, because then you would have to sell people on two things. Sell them to play WoW in general, and then sell them to play WoW PvP on top of that. If we are going to grow the size of WoW PvP in the WoW PvP community, we are essentially drawing from players who are already playing WoW. So that's why, at least if you try to design MMO PvP, you should cater more towards the MMO aspect than the PvP aspect, because you want it to be fun enough for people to want to play in the first place.
I say this all the time. Raikou said it very well. This is the major issue with retail PvP right here. And the thing is,
I think the major issue, honestly, is the fact that there's too many buttons. There's too many buttons.
Yep.
There's too much going on. It's hard to keep track of what's happening, and it's confusing. Like, that's the reason why I don't play. Like, for me, I can't tell what's happening in the game in PvP, and I've played it for 15 years. Like, half of the plays that people try to make, I don't really fully understand them.
I don't even...
Okay, couple things on this. 1, totally agree. 110% there are way too many fucking abilities in WoW PvP in general. As a healer main, I play a lot of Restoration Shaman, good bit of Resto Druid, good bit of Mistweaver Monk. Why do I need 50 keybinds to be able to play the game? How many healing spells do I really need to keep my team alive? How many utility spells do I need as a whole? realistically, you could prune the number of spells to about 20 per class, and then I think it would make more sense overall. If you have, like, say, 5 or 6 buttons for damage, you've got 2 or 3 offensive cooldowns, you've got 2 or 3 defensive cooldowns, you've got like 5 or 6 buttons spread out for utility, and then you've got maybe 2 or 3 buttons for mobility. I totally think you could get all of the classes down to about 20 abilities a class or spec in PvP, but in order to do that, you would need a separate team to essentially prune the class down to a shell of what it is outside of PvP, which players would also find unfun. So you have that sort of catch-22. Second thing I want to talk about that he brings up is that he's been playing this game for however many years and still doesn't understand what's going on in retail PvP. Yes, a lot of players don't. It is it is very bad, and I don't want to sound completely disillusioned because I study this game so much outside of actually playing it, to where I myself barely understand what's going on. Like, I have a good idea of the fundamentals, but I can't tell you every single little micro nuance of what's happening between 6 different players clashing with each other in an arena sense. The sobering moment for me was when I was at BlizzCon last year with my brother, and we were watching the arena event live. He did not understand a single thing that was happening on the screen, and he's been playing World of Warcraft just as long as I have. Granted, he doesn't play PvP. He's more of a Mythic Plus and Raider Andy, but I essentially had to be talking in his ear the whole time, telling him what was happening, why people were screaming and cheering when a mage pressed Ice Block, because it's like, okay, well, the mage didn't actually die. Why are people happy that the mage didn't die? It's because he gave up his most important cooldown. And to the maybe 200 people that were there, well, 200 is a little bit, yeah, about 200. To the 200 people at the live event that were watching it, it was really hype. It made a lot of sense. But if you're somebody who's trying to get into the game for the first time, or you're a general outside viewer, like a casual WoW player, you have no clue what's going on. This is a really big problem that ultimately I think holds WoW back from being an esport. It's just not watchable, and it's too much of an effort and investment to even bother getting into.
And blame Blizzard.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Because if 90% of your player base plays Mythic Plus,
exactly,
and 10% of your player base plays Arena,
who are you
cater to the 90% makes
exactly.
sense
Yeah,
to
it's
me.
common sense.
So I don't even blame them, but it's still true. So let's get into this a bit deeper. Raikou also tweets,
this is definitely true. However, one of the reasons is that I think that PvP in games that are MMOs, it's just like an MMO PvP is like, in my opinion, an oxymoron, right? Because MMOs are built off of consistent character progression that you work towards over time, and PvP is built around fighting in an arena and, you know, having a challenge with another player. How can you do that in an uneven battlefield? You can't. It was doomed to begin with. From the very beginning, it was doomed.
the most notable.
Oh, okay. So he's talking about gear differentials because it's like, at least in my scenario, why I enjoy WoW PvP is that it largely caters to that fantasy aspect that other MMOs just simply aren't able to grasp in the PvP sense. But yeah, I mean, I agree in the sense of there's just so much upfront investment that you need to even get involved. A lot of players aren't willing to put themselves through that, of being undergeared, starting out playing the game by playing at a disadvantage versus other players who've played the game longer. It's like if you played League of Legends, right? And you are a silver player, you just started the game and you're playing silver. If you go up against another silver player who's played the game for 8 years longer than you, and that silver player starts the game with a legendary or a mythic item and is shit stomping you in lane, why would anyone want to play that? So it really does beg the question of if gear disparity should even be a thing, or if there should just be a vendor at the start of every expansion where people can go and get gear and just be on an even playing field from the get-go. I know there's the MMO Andes who are like, oh, but my progression in PvP. Well, if PvP is going to be a minigame, then let it be a minigame. Don't try and play both sides. And like, if the retail devs don't give a shit about PvP, which they don't, they very clearly don't, just come out and say it. Don't try and act like, oh, we care about you, do you PvPers, oh, we'll throw you a bone here and there. No, I would double down on that minigame aspect, because then it would be more fun. then it would be easier to get people into. Then people could do it when they're bored, when they're not having any Mythic Plus things going on, when they're not having Raid Night going on, and we would still be seeing an overall growth of players in the PvP community.
Noticeable thing about playing Cataclysm compared to retail is that in Cataclysm, my spells, mage, are single target. My Ice Lance, my Orb doesn't go on CC targets. Single target damage is high. Meanwhile, in DF, Sheep is 6 seconds, and I AoE on every button I press. Everyone else AoEs as well. Once again, yes, very well said. If you want PvP to return to this like really high skill expression, AoE spamming should probably not be a part of it. But that ruins Mythic Plus, so it might not be a good idea for Blizzard to do that, but it's still worth...
That's probably true. Like, I'm thinking back, and like every expansion since like Legion, whenever I had the highest rating, our strategy was usually to kill everybody at the same time. Like, yeah, just get them all together and like do Whirlwind, Sweeping Strikes, and Blade Storm, and then they're dead. And if that didn't work, then you're dead. Because they are doing Whirlwind, Sweeping Strikes, and Blade Storm, and they killed you.
I'm shaking my head because he's actually, he's right. Like, you look at the popular compositions now, you look at Ret Warrior, you look at DHLE, that was a huge thing for a while. You look at these other melee cleaves, these rushdown compositions, or you look at even the popular spellcaster cleaves, which is like Affliction Warlock and Shadow Priest, or Affliction Warlock and Fire Mage. They are all compositions that just try to kill you at the same time. We've actually seen a little bit less of Rogue Mage Priest in these like setup compositions, since Blizzard has sort of doubled down on this sort of making everything Mythic Plus type of vibe that they're going with, where everybody does insane AoE damage now, and you get AoE all over the place. So it's why you see a lot of the greats in PvP going back to Cataclysm and enjoying PvP in Cataclysm significantly more. It's because that was an era of the game where the game wasn't completely centered around Mythic Plus. Because we're not playing World of Warcraft right now, we're playing World of Mythic Plus. PvP is not balanced at all, really. We still don't have a PvP dedicated dev since Holinka left. And at least the raids as of right now, the top-end Mythic raids are being balanced around the very small percentage of World First groups that are still competing. So a large part of the player base that wants to do other things outside of Mythic Plus are just left out.
Talking about and saying that this is probably a root fundamental issue. Yeah. The other issue is self-healing. So you have like two massive issues. Self-healing is too high. That's talked about. We've done that. We've packed that. Everyone gets that. Everyone agrees there, right? Self-healing.
Yes, 100%. It's not even close. This happened in like Mists of Pandaria, is whenever it really kind of escalated. And then in Legion, it was like
way
huge.
Too high. But the other pillar is this. AoE for every class, mobility for every class, like, is just too high because of Mythic Plus. It needs to be that way for the Mythic Plus design to actually make sense.
Yeah.
And I thought Raiku's just said it very well. Once again, Raikou says, can we please change this? This is a good example. It should be a node here. Instead of picking Splitting Ice, it should be your Ice Lance now does 25% more damage, but it doesn't cleave. Stuff like this is horrible for PvP. So once again, Splitting Ice makes your Ice Lance...
Nobody cares about PvP. Look at this. This guy's one of the most popular, or one of the most like renowned, like PvPers. This post has 27 likes. Ugh. Blizzard doesn't care about them. The sooner that PvPers realize that Blizzard doesn't care about you, and you should spend your time like just stop. Like the best thing, if I knew somebody who was trying to get into.
Okay, I think Asmon's going on to a little bit different point here, so I do want him to finish his point, but I want to address this part of it real quick. So yeah, I mean, it's true, nobody gives a shit about the PvP community. You see that one of the most popular mages in the world can't even get 30 likes on a post. The devs don't care about us. Other players don't really care to get involved or get invested in PvP. But I want to add on to this and say that I do believe that this is also the PvP community's fault. We really are lacking in the content creation aspect. And unfortunately, I feel like this lack of content has kind of just trickled down to where it's only gotten worse, to where trying to build a channel now on WoW PvP is like committing sauce on the side, at least in a content creator perspective. So you get these really high skill, really renowned players at this video game, and nobody's actually capitalizing it by making content for that game that would bring in players or that would sort of cultivate a strong, healthy player base. Because the people that at least do want to create content for this game end up opting to become Twitch streamers, and so you don't have a lot of YouTube content, you don't have a lot of short form content, you don't really have a lot of noise or media attracting people into the game like you did, say, back in Wrath or Cataclysm when people had those old school PvP montages. And I think this is something where it's like, when I had my copium addiction, I would completely just ignore the fact that, you know, you see these posts getting impressions on Twitter, and one of the most respected mages to ever touch this game isn't cracking 30 likes on here. But it's the truth, and the quicker we can face the music, I think the better adapt our minds will be towards shifting our focus back towards having fun with the game rather than trying to make it something that it's not, because Blizzard just doesn't want it to be that way. So let's see what else he has to say, at least on this point.
Competitive WoW PvP, I would give them the best advice possible, and I would tell them to quit. Stop it. Go learn League of Legends, go learn Valorant, go learn Counter-Strike, and invest your 10,000 hours into a game that matters. The player base doesn't care about you. The developer doesn't care about you. Viewers don't care about you. And you don't make any money. What are you doing?
He's right. So let me put things in the perspective. So let me break some more things down for you, just to emphasize how bad this problem really is, right? This was unfortunate. This was advice that I really wish I heard 3 years ago when I was 19 getting started into that. Because I really did want to go pro at some sort of video game at the time. I'm now 22, and I now feel very like bitter and resentful that I did invest so much time into WoW PvP. But I at least want to undo that by making content for the game and being able to salvage somewhat of it, because I still enjoy WoW and I enjoy WoW PvP as a whole, but you know, I can just kiss any dreams of going pro goodbye. So let me get something straight for you. If you do invest your time into World of Warcraft PvP and you get so good that you're a rank 1 player, you're one of the best, you got a competitive team that's not sponsored because every sponsor pulled out, except for the 2 orgs that compete in the world first, along with some couple indie orgs, but let's be real here, they're going to drop WoW when they get more popular as well. If you get 4th place in a cup, your team will get $100 to split between 4 people on your team. Immediately, a third of that prize pool is already taxed. So you get $66 to split between 4 people. Which, let me pull up my calculator real quick and get some quick maths going. They only do these events like 2 or 3 times a year. So, 2 or 3 times a year, you are the best players at World of Warcraft. But 3 teams beat you out. You get 4th place. You get a whopping total of $16.50. I am so glad I went to college and got a job.
Be a choice node, and for PvP, you would choose like your Icelands does more damage, but it doesn't split. Or your Icelands doesn't do more damage, but it does split, and you choose one. So you can choose like a single target build or an AoE build, and that would make a lot more sense. And then Veneruki says, this talent has always made me laugh. It cleaves your spells and gives your single target damage. It would be awesome if it was a choice
Tough
node.
choice there.
But there's lots of examples like this. The same thing with Comet Storm, the same thing with Ice Nova, right? You have these like AoE classes just start to build up, and it's like, wait, no, we want options to make single target specs so that you make CC great again. So you go for CC chains and burst and stuff like that. But anyway, we'll kind of venture there. I wanted to talk about this because I thought Raikou said it very well. I agree with Veneruki's take here, and a lot of people ask my thoughts on like War Within, and like essentially this is it. It's like, well, I mean, it's gonna be awesome.
It's PvP in WoW has been dead since Mists of Pandaria. Like really, like WoD, it was like kind of there, but the truth is that everybody who wanted a competitive third-person, single target or single unit competitive experience, a huge group of those people moved over to MOBAs. And also, like, the player base just isn't there. Like, you don't have people that are playing and queuing BGs anymore because they're hard to understand. You don't know what's going on. There's just too many things in the game for a normal person to get into the game and be able to understand it. Like, for example, I could watch like a PvP video from, you know, like Pat or like the Maydai videos or Swifty videos. And even if you didn't really understand the game, you could pretty much see what was happening in classic WoW PvP. You could get it. You know what I mean? Whereas in retail, you can be playing the game. You can be actively playing the game, and you will understand less than you did if you didn't play the game and you watched the classic PvP video.
Okay, so couple things. Regarding the point about BGs, I do think that Blizzard should cater more of their attention towards that casual PvP base, just because there are so many more people who play casual PvP than competitive PvP. I think that I've mentioned this before, that there's sort of like you should opt for this funnel, right? Where you start with your wide net, your casual PvP, make casual PvP great for people who don't PvP to try out casual PvP. And then through there, you get people to funnel down towards competitive PvP. Regarding the whole battleground design and battleground situation, totally agree there. Like, hot take, maybe lukewarm, who fucking knows? I really do think that Blizzard should start pruning battlegrounds, and then if they do want to make more battlegrounds, only focus on capture the flag or the base control, kind of like Arathi Basin. Because having so many battlegrounds like Temple of Katmogu, where you have to hold the orbs, or Silver Shard Mines, where you have to stand in the fucking minecart, and you gotta have more people in the minecart than the enemy team, or the minecart's gonna flip, or Seething Shore, where you're mining Azerite, and I don't know why it hasn't been removed, because it's the worst battleground to ever exist in the game, and if you say Strand of the Ancients is worse, I will stick jumper cables in your water. Seething Shore is just absolutely dog shit. Why do I need a battleground where the whole point of winning the battleground isn't actually killing people? Or team fights are basically useless because I just need to mine Azerite. The game mode where I want to kill people, I have to mine Azerite to beat out my enemies. It doesn't make a lick of sense. I totally agree. Battlegrounds, they need to be pruned. I don't know about this new one in the War Within. I've personally not tested it on the beta, but even I have a hard time watching it as somebody who just degenerates so much of my time into WoW PvP. It doesn't make sense. It's not conducive for a viewer to watch. And I find it funny that he brings up the old WoW PvP montages because, like, again, back in Wrath, I would watch this, like, undead arcane mage do a PvP montage to, like, heavy metal or rock music in the background, and you could very clearly tell what was going on. He was on Warsong Gulch and he was blowing people up with like arcane missiles and arcane barrage and shit like that. That was really cool.
You can't do it
if you're a Mythic Plus player or a World First Raider, but if you're a PvPer, like there's some really fundamental root issues.
BGs are hard to understand.
Yeah, so anyway, that's my take.
Yeah, they are massively too hard to understand. Way too hard to understand. And I think this is what's happening, right? Is that you have these games and they're so complex. And also, why would somebody care about PvP in an MMO?
Self-healing.
Where is the audience coming from that cares about PvP in an MMO? Because all of the people that care about MMO PvP in the context of, like, what do you call it? All the people that care about MMO PvP in the context of a competitive environment are automatically going to move away, and they're not going to like that because you're going into the game with an advantage that the other person doesn't have.
Yeah.
So, like, how could you possibly enjoy a game if you want to play on an even playing field with somebody else? It's like you're starting with, you know, a scout and the other guy has an op. Like in Counter-Strike, like they have a massive advantage over you. Like, that's it. Now, can you beat them if you're better than them? Yeah. But is it going to be harder? Absolutely. So that's what happens. And you losing those people, and then the people that care about getting better gear and then just stomping people, you can't do that as much as you used to anymore because of stat scaling. And also, it doesn't feel as good because of the way that the game is designed. So who are they making the game for? Who like, where is this target audience of PvPers? Who are they? Where are they? Are they in the room with us right now? Probably fucking not, because they're gone. They stopped playing the game 10 years ago. Nostalgia.
Yeah, so regarding this point, I totally get what he means, at least in the context of, okay, well, who is PvP being designed for? Personally, people like me are people who like the MMO fantasy aspect, but also like the opportunity or having the option to be able to fight other players if we want to. And I think WoW should really double down and kind of play more into that, because at least when it came to gearing before, especially in what's so unfortunate is that we were seeing a massive surge of players come back to WoW during Shadowlands, because, you know, COVID and the pandemic and everything, it just drew a bunch of people back to kind of get that old hit of nostalgia. And then Blizzard fumbled the bag by releasing by releasing the worst expansion of all time, where you had severe gear disparities. And I hate using this word because it's so overused, but I do want to say that the gameplay feedback loop was toxic in that regard, where you spend so many extraneous hours degenning in and out of PvP to upgrade your PvP gear, so you can then go into the arena and stomp out lobies because they didn't do the same. So the only reason that you're playing is out of retribution, because you're getting shit stomped by PvP players who play this game for 16 hours a day, while you have a job, a spouse, kids, a dog, etc. to take care of. Then you finally degen enough at the game to get to that same power level so you can go shit stomp lobies. But at that point, you're just making the game worse for other people. There's not really much skill expression going on. So when you're fighting on an uneven playing field until you get to higher ratings where then the playing field gets evened out, it's completely scuffed in a competitive sense. But I do think that MMO PvP, WoW PvP still does have a purpose by serving as that sort of, dare I say, mini game mode, where you have that fantasy aspect of having an MMO character in a battleground or in an arena where they can fight with other players. I am quite hopeful for Battleground Blitz, at least the rated variant of it, because I know at least getting into rated Battlegrounds was really difficult and was a massive barrier for players to try and get over. But also, Arena is just way too complicated of a game for a beginner PvP player to even think about dipping their toes into. And then you add the gear disparity on top of it, it makes for a rather unfun experience. And I feel, as a PvP content creator, that I'm being disingenuous by trying to inject copium into my arm and then tell you guys that it's fantastic, because it's not. There are points of the game where it's fun, and I have a ton of fun doing it, but the current iteration of its gameplay loop, while it's not as bad as it has historically been, it's still kind of shitty, and you do kind of gotta slug through it. And honestly, I don't blame you if you don't want to do that, because the game should not be that way.
Andy's, yeah, exactly. I'll give you guys a link to the video. I agree with Zaryu a lot about this. The same 300 people with 20 characters? Yeah, exactly. Like, MMO PvP is because you can be a stronger character with skill, which is why it's good. It makes you go out of your way to get better, to go compete in the arena. I understand that's the way that you think about it, but I'll change the way that, like, this is the way that I think a lot of people think about it. They see somebody else that has an advantage over them, and they quit. Because they say, this isn't fair. I'm going to lose. And how do I know that? Do you remember back in Classic WoW when everybody was so adamant on the idea that people like the challenge of playing on a lower, on like a 60-40 PvP server where they're the minority? And like they like playing on a imbalanced PvP server because they like the challenge of having a bunch of other people around? And then you saw every single one of those servers go completely one-sided? See, people say this. They don't do it. That's not actually what people do.
I would say about 80% of people think this way, where it's like they go in, they see the very clear disparity in player power, causing them to start off playing this game at a massive disadvantage, and they quit. And again, I really don't blame them for it. As much as I'd like to be all peaches and cream and say that, oh, if you guys just stick it out and it'll get so much better, because, you know, it will. I also don't fault you if you don't want to go through that, because it's not a fun experience. And why would you want to play a game that you're not having fun with?
This is complete fucking, you know, oh, I'm a badass. And then, like, you're getting killed by 4 people at the same time. You have no chance of winning. This happens to you for 2 hours and you quit the game. Like, that's it. You think you do, but you don't. Well, yeah, you think, exactly. Or everyone did AVV, didn't PvP. It turned into a PvE race. Yeah, exactly. Let's see here. I also tend to dislike MMO PvP because the class balance has to be very good for it, and it's never going to be very good. That's the thing, is that you're never going to get people to respect asymmetrical PvP. It's literally that simple. If you go into combat with an advantage that somebody else doesn't have, that is not something that you are like choosing for that round. Why not? Because it's not fair. What do you mean, why not? It's not fair. One person has an advantage the other person doesn't have. They win. Well, it's not enjoyable anymore. Life isn't fair. I know, but people are playing video games to get away from life. Think about it. We don't want it fair? You say we don't want it fair. But the numbers indicate otherwise. And that's the difference. People...
Zach, how the fuck do you do this all day? Like 10 hours a day or however long you stream, just like argue with chatters. Oh my goodness.
Love to talk a big game about this stuff. But the truth is that when you see people that are going up against insurmountable odds and people that are going into a fight knowing that they have an 80% chance of losing because of something that, you know, is external to the fight, you see people not queuing up anymore. They're quitting. And every single observable metric proves this. It's tedious. Yes, exactly. You say you want it to be fair because you think you're going to win. Exactly. Of course. Some people just want to go seal clubbing. Yeah, exactly.
So I think in the context of having fun, right? I would categorize how good a game is by how much fun can be milked out of it, and overall how fun it is to the player that is playing it, right? When you are playing any sort of game versus another player, the overwhelming majority of players will find winning to be the fun thing. If he wants to talk about another asymmetrical PvP game, I would look into Dead by Daylight. That has one of the most toxic feedback loops between the two sides, like the killer and survivor roles that there are, because of how insanely difficult it is to balance and how much the two roles influence each other in a negative way. And I know even though in this context we're talking about asymmetrical PvP in the sense of player power relative to each other, that's still a comparison that I think could even add on to this sort of argument regarding asymmetrical PvP in the first place. But very few people actually have fun playing a game that they know they're going to lose a lot more than they win. Well, I mean, I guess if you consider gambling, but that's a little bit of a different topic, you know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, at least when you're playing versus other players, the goal is to win. So ideally, your mind would be more geared towards wanting things to be balanced and wanting things to be fair, so that you have a shot of outclassing another player and being able to dunk on them because, you know, skill issue, right? And I do see this sort of argumentation come up a lot, especially in like the World of PvP subreddit or like forums where people will talk a big game, and then when it comes time to put your money where your mouth is, the money goes elsewhere.
Asmon, such a fried take for someone who did PvP in retail for 4 years. What about...
You don't need to PvP in retail for 4 years to see that this is going on. You can log on in PvP right now. I think the whole appeal to authority claim is bullshit and weak, because this is an observable issue that you can see right now if you load into the game and you load into PvP and you try to do a battleground like right now. You don't need to be playing the game for 4 years to know this. I've been playing the game very hardcore for 3 years and I know this. You can find out right now that when you are playing a battleground and you're going up against a rep paladin that has full 528 gear and you are not even in the greens yet for this season, even with item level scaling, you are going to get one shot and you're not going to have fun that whole game. You're just going to get dunked on.
About what I'm saying isn't true. Mr. I have a WoW profile picture. Step 1, find a friend. Step 2, play 2v2 and have fun. No, you're not going to have fun. See, like, you don't even understand. What's your character name? Give me your character name right now.
You're not going to have fun unless you... Because, like, a big thing too, right? We don't have a lot of players playing this game. Season 4 is a little bit of a joke season. Obviously, things are going to be different in the War than Season 1 because WoW is a cyclical game that gets a lot of players at the beginning of an expansion and not so much at the end of one. If you play 2v2 right now, I'm learning Frost Mage and I've been playing a lot of Rogue Mage, the most like overpowered and broken 2v2 comp. You are going to be facing multi-rank 1s and Gladiator players as early as 1600, which again is the equivalent of like gold. So you're going to have a gear disadvantage, and you're also going to be at a skill disadvantage. And heaven forbid, you or your friend that you make doesn't play a healer, because unless you're playing rogue mage, you need a healer in 2v2 to do well. And a large part of having fun in World of Warcraft 2 comes from having a social network of friends that you can play with and queue up with, because sitting in LFG for hours on end is also making the game miserable if you even dare want to try it in the competitive sense. But we're not even talking about the competitive sense a whole lot here, because PvP right now is so rough that even the casual players are having a difficult time trying to justify why they should play this over, say, Mythic Plus. So I hope that makes sense.
I'm going to look you up. There are a lot of people who have been very outspoken about me not knowing what I'm talking about. But what I think they don't understand is that their experience playing the game is so much different than somebody who is new to the game.
Yeah.
That's 8 years, man. I agree, it's really bad for new players or people who don't put effort in. Why would somebody want to put in effort when they're losing an unfair fight? You queue into a match, you lose to somebody who has better gear than you, and you're dead. Why would somebody do that? Why wouldn't they just immediately stop playing and play another game where they're not at a disadvantage? And I'm thinking about this from a perspective, because I know the reason why, right? It's so you can get the gear and do it to somebody else. Sure. But that is not what PvPers and people that actually like a competitive environment want to do. That's what MMO Andes want to do.
Yeah.
Getting gear is not an issue. In Dragonflight, Source, trust me, bro. You don't start with the gear. And if you...
Again, right now, I'm trying to gear a Frost Mage. It is taking me at least a week, and I am still not in full gear yet. And there's the crafted pieces, there's the tier set that you have to get. You gotta get your weapon, you gotta get all your enchants, your gems, your whatever, your sockets. I think I already said that word, but I've been fighting at a gear disadvantage for over a week now, and I'm fast tracking by LFGing and doing all my dailies and my weekly quests and everything like that. It is just, it's not worth it, man. It is just still too long to try and get fully geared. So even though it's significantly better now compared to how it has been, realistically, gearing shouldn't even be a thing in PvP if we really want it to be taken seriously. Or if we want to try and convince players who otherwise would not play PvP to play PvP, we should just make it to where the gear is instantaneous for them. And then if you really want to have your MMO progression, well, then you do it in the rest of the game that the devs actually made the game for, which is PvE.
Think that it's not an issue, you don't understand how much free time people have. And why would somebody, how many hours do you think it takes to get fully geared at the beginning of a new season? 4 to 8 hours. So you're telling me that within 4 hours, you can get the best PvP gear in the game? No. Okay, of course not. Right, of course not. So here's the...
No, because they always cap conquest at the beginning of the season, and then on top of that, it depends on how lucky you get with your weekly vault rolls, and then you'll have some players that'll have force set, and so the first like 4 weeks of the season are absolutely completely fried because some people have tier set, some people don't, some people have their weapons, some people don't, mainly based on luck. Then you have to go to raids. Some people are running raid pieces just to get their tier set early, and player power is so fucked at the beginning of a new expansion or at the beginning of a new season, and it is still a slog to try and go from 0 gear to full gear.
The point, okay? My point that I'm making is that WoW PvP is made for no one. The high-end competitive players don't really get any sort of like real advantage from playing the game, because so if you want to compete in a game and make money, like let's say you're a 19-year-old young buck, right? You're a 19-year-old guy and you really want to get into esports. Why would you start playing World of Warcraft? Why wouldn't
I started playing PvP seriously at 19 3 years ago. So yeah. Whoops.
you start trying to play League or another game that's more popular? So you don't have the young players that are trying to get into the game because they want to be in the competitive scene, because there is no competitive scene.
Right.
Right? There's just a handful of old people. So the second thing, the average casual player is getting alienated because they are playing asymmetrical PvP against somebody who's way better than them.
Yeah.
Then number 3, you queue into 1700 2v2s, you're going to see somebody who's a gladiator. That's insane. It's insane that that happens. So you're playing against people that have a 10-year advantage over you and that have 0.5% achievements, and they're just going to stomp the shit out of you.
So just to kind of emphasize how bad this is, think of like you are playing League of Legends or you're playing Dota or Valorant or Overwatch, right? And you are a gold player. When you're trying to go from gold to platinum, in order to get from gold to platinum, you have to beat challenger players who are playing in gold. And it's very clear that they're playing in challenger because you see like a challenger skin that they have. Well, maybe not challenger. Challenger would be like rank 1, but you would have to beat like a master rated player to go from gold to platinum. And it's because there are so few people playing the game that high rated players, they don't get queues, so they create low rated tunes to climb the ladder again because they're bored shitless, and that's really all there is to do.
Right, take a step out. Anyone who starts playing League today is at a massive disadvantage. They are at a massive disadvantage, but here's the difference. They stand to gain way more.
Yeah.
People care about League, and you can make a lot more money playing League. That's the difference. Asymmetrical PvP only works in large-scale battles. Yeah, listen, it's this simple. No one will ever care about or respect asymmetrical PvP other than the spectacle of it. That's it. To the extent that you can queue in with a tool or a resource that somebody else cannot queue in with, nobody will ever respect or care about that. Period. That's it. Don't try to make MMO PvP competitive. Try to make it fun. And if you do that, maybe things would be okay. But yeah, anyway, that's what I think. I think WoW PvP is dead. It was always destined to die. And now it's so dead that nobody cares about it. And there's just a few old people that are trying to relive the glory days of 15 years ago. That's all there is to it. Anybody who cares about PvP is playing a different game. So yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, it's harsh, but it's true. So, I mean, I guess some closing thoughts. So I think we saw a lot of those players that were heavy into PvP shift over from World of Warcraft to League of Legends in about that like 2009 to 2012 era, so like Cataclysm MOP. Just because that was the game that was growing at the time. Although I think if you do want to go pro at League, you actually have to do it before you turn 18, which is really sad now, because it's like, if you have two players, one's 20, one is 18, and they're both of equal skill, there is absolutely zero incentive that anybody would ever take the 20-year-old over the 18-year-old. Competitive games have gotten so fried in general as well, which is why, in a sense, I'm really glad that I didn't go down that route, because unless you're Faker, right, your only chance of being able to use competitive gaming into a career is if you become a content creator, which is why you see a lot of the more well-known League players, at least. A lot of the well-known League players that have made it, they decided to do content creation as opposed to go pro. And they also tend to be a little bit older, but you can utilize that into something that's a brand that actually benefits you. I mean, overall, I do agree with Asmon on most of the points here. I believe that PvP should be balanced towards more fun. And I think if you can make it fun, you can draw players back in, you can draw existing players back in, you might be able to develop a new player base. Who knows how this BG Blitz thing is going to go when it does launch in the War Within. I foresee a sort of renaissance within World of Warcraft PvP, at least in the BG Blitz sense, because there's a new category of battleground content that is untapped that can be tapped into. But just as I believe it's Blizzard's fault for creating a absolutely shitty PvP experience across the board, at least getting into it, I do think that the PvP community itself is also sharing the responsibility by not really creating content to fester and keep that fire alive. So I think that's about it. That's my whole response to Asmongold. You know, I think that the points were very solid, very blunt across the board, but it was something that a lot of us people who still are hanging on to PvP already know. As much as some of the really diehard fans want to keep denying it and keep the rose-tinted glasses on, I think all of us really do know deep down that nobody cares about us. But I'm still going to play the game because I find it fun at the moment, and when I stop having fun, then I will probably go and play something else. Until next time though, this is Moon. If you really do enjoy this style of content, it would mean a lot to me if you could support my channel. Like, comment, subscribe, you know the whole 9 yards. I do stream live at Twitch. I'm hoping to make something out of that one day, but until next time though, this is Moon, signing out.